Buenos días a todas y a todos quienes nos han...
Good morning, everyone who is joining us here in the room and also everyone who's joining us online on the YouTube channel of the Agency for Quality in Education and also over Zoom. So the SSES is an OECD study assessing the skills of 15-year-old students and the factors that have an influence in these
antecedentes migratorios. En 2023 se realizó la segunda versión de este estudio y es el primer ciclo en donde participa Chile junto a otros 16 países o ciudades, de los cuales 6 son latinoamericanos: Perú, México, Sobral de Brasil y Bogotá, y Manizales de Colombia y nuestro país, Chile. En abril de 2024 se realizó el primer lanzamiento de los resultados del estudio en Bulgaria, en el volumen 1, y hoy presentamos las...
And today we have the second version. Before we begin the launching of the SSES 2023, we would like to greet who's joining us today. We would like to greet, first of all, the Director of Education and Competences and Special Advisor in Educational Policy of the General Secretariat of the OECD in Paris, Andreas Schleicher. We also greet the Undersecretary of School in Preschool Teaching, Claudio Lagos, the Executive Secretary of the Agency for Quality in Education, Gino Cortés Volados, and also the members of the Council of the Agency, Marisol Latorre, and also the leaders that are joining them. To the Superintendent of Education, Mauricio Farias, to the Coordinator, Enid Vargas, the Executive Vice President of Funge, Daniela Criviño, the Executive Director of Integra Foundation, Carlos González, the Director of CPIP, Lilia Concha, the Head of the Division of General Education, Flavia Fiabane, to the National Coordinator of the Curricula and Assessment Unit, Viviana Castilla, and also the Deputy Director of Public Education, Patricio Leiva, and his team. We also greet our panel members that are going to be joining us today. Roberto Ricci, President of Imalsi Italy, who is joining us from afar. Eri Shimamukai, researcher and CEO of Rokuyo Inc. in Japan. Jennifer Adams, Executive Committee of Karanga Global Alliance for Cell and Life Skills. We also like to greet the Director of the Ibero-American States Organization, Javier Azócar, the Head of UNESCO Education, Valdencir Mendes, and also the UNICEF representative in Chile, Violet Speak. To the foundations, research centers, universities, and representatives of national organizations who are joining us, the executive directors of the local education services, and also the directors, and of course, all of the students from the different establishments and schools who are here today. May you all be warmly welcome as well, and thank you for joining us today. So the findings that we're going to be seeing today and analyzing today have recommendations that are key for improving the policies and practices in order to promote better social-emotional learning in students. Before we go into the results of the study, we will invite the Undersecretary of Education, Claudia Lagos, preschool teacher, so she can address us. Well, good morning, everyone. I would like to join all of the greetings, and I would like to firstly give you a warm welcome on behalf of Nicolás Cataldo, Minister of Education, because due to very known facts, he is currently away addressing those issues. And also Secretary Alejandra Arratia, who's also working in the same issue. I would like to start by highlighting that the OECD has selected our country, to Chile, for the launching of the results of the SSES Volume 2 results, and that this is done also in our House of Government, because this assessment has been a historic request both for teachers and students to have a broad outlook for educational quality that is not only the score of a standardized test, but should also include a comprehensive view that considers social-emotional skills, that have become so relevant, especially after what we've lived through the pandemic.
Bien, no quiero y no voy.
Well, I am not gonna give you any information regarding the results that is gonna be provided by Andras. I would like to also highlight some elements that we need to bear in mind. The importance of motivating feedback, not only because it improves academic performance, but also promotes curiosity, trust, and optimism in classroom, having gender perspective for everyone to feel part of the educational space, so this can become more inclusive. Fundamentally, is to change the outlook and consider that social emotional skills matter, and that even go beyond the classroom. Also, a decreasing bullying and improving performance can have an impact in other aspects of life, such as the arrival into the labor market. So having the results of the survey will allow us to make better decisions and work on other work lines that we have started as the Ministry of Education. For 12 years, we have been adding mechanisms for assessment of social emotional skills in the questionnaires that we apply in SIMSE, in the comprehensive learning diagnosis, and in the improvement to include a system of monitoring of co-living. So each establishment of the country, school, from kindergartens to daycare to schools, because we care about trajectory. The idea is that everyone can have information on the state of the coexistence and the environment, and also through the IDPS in SIMSE. The curricular update that is being pushed by the ministry has a scope focused precisely on social emotional well-being, an update that for is making systematize the opinion of close to 800,000 students and teachers together with UNESCO. From the Undersecretary of Preschool Education, as a plan of the reactivation plan, we also have available to families and education communities the social emotional briefcase that gives different tools in order to support and also safekeep the social emotional well-being of boys and girls. To develop this through the educational aspect is key. I would like to also mention that during this year, through this program of coexistence, we reach 150 communes in the country, strengthening the work of coexistence through sessions of work in communal network with different kinds of educational entities. So we have been able to support them in matters of school violence and good school environment. We're also working on the bill on the educational well-being of education communities that wants to take charge of the role of state and the institutions, so the educational communities can be protected spaces for well-being, to establish new standards for the internal management of the educational coexistence, and also favor the well-being of teams, acknowledging the importance of the role of teachers and people who aid in education. I hope this is a wonderful morning for everyone that allows us to reflect and collaborate. So I thank everyone for being here today. Thank you very much. So we'd like to thank the Secretary of Preschool Education, Claudia Lagos, for her words. And now to get into this study done by the OECD, we'd like to invite the Executive Secretary of the Agency of Quality in Education, Gino Cortés, to address us in his opening speech.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning, how do you do? Great. Today is a day that starts with some news that, speaking of the results of the social emotional results, it's unavoidable not to mention this. The Undersecretary already mentioned the issue that regarding what Undersecretary Alejandra Data and the Minister are doing and the reason they're not here. And I also would like to take this opportunity to excuse them for their absence. And also I would like to show my empathy and my condolences and my sadness for the community of this boarding school, Barros Aranas, that are going through a horrible time now. There's 35 students, and with a number of them having a high risk of death. And this, without a doubt, makes us mention them. And speaking of the results of the survey, in the context of the need of having a school culture that also promotes environments for understanding, respect, that are peaceful and that precisely it's highlighted by all of this study and all of the information that we provide you with from the Agency of Quality in Education. So today we're also here to get to know some news that are brought to us directly by Andreas Schleicher, who I would like to personally thank for being here in person in Chile and to share from Chile to the rest of the world, for everyone who is following us on the YouTube channel, on the Agency of Quality Education, and on the streaming, so we can know about the results of Volume 2 of the Survey in Social and Emotional Skills 2023 that we're also going to be sharing in the context of the countries that participate in this study. And this study is also we can also understand it in the context of the different challenges that we have faced and the generations that are in Chile and that also have faced different challenges throughout history. I would just like to remind you briefly how the educational challenge of the 60s generation, for instance, was to expand the school coverage. We can also remember how that generation, in order to achieve that many Chilean students would attend schools, we created institutions as a state, such as the CPIP, represented here, which is a Center for Pedagogical Research and Perfecting, and also JUNGI, represented by Daniela Triviño here, which is the board for preschool schools, JUNAEF, that addresses school lunches, and also other research institutions. So these and many other institutions allowed us in Chile to have a basis for enabling conditions that allowed to meet the needs of the system in order to face this challenge. And thanks to those public policies, today we have 98% of coverage in education where our children in basic education or in the first cycle of education attend school regularly. From that point of view, let's move from the generation of the 60s to the 90s generation, where in the Chile educational policy we face another challenge, which was the quality of education. We can all remember the reports back at the time. There were a lot of researchers and people who participated in those conversations back in the 90s, where not only was about filling up schools, but also closing gaps. We have a report how inequality was manifesting itself in education. This allowed us to work on the basis of the role of the educational system and how to improve in that sense. And in the 21st century, the big leap in the 2000s was the leap towards learning. Through the strong investment here, we have directors of local services and also teachers from the school system that through the investment of laws such as the CEP law allowed us to get better quality in education. From this big leap to learning, in Chile we were pioneers in adding ourselves to great assessments such as PISA since the 2000s, so we can know where we were at and where could we get to comparing ourselves with the rest of the world, and that is how we started participating in this study. The current challenge is more in line with the importance of the socio-emotional aspects. In the context of continuing to closing gaps, the reality that we need to face nowadays as a country, as a society, and in a global world is also in the development of social and emotional skills, especially from the revolution that technology's influence has in the school environment. So this topic, and for this reason in Chile, we wanted to join this first study of the OECD so we can, after the pandemic, can also get information as well as the other countries that participate in the study and the rest of the countries that will participate in the study, so we can get information that will allow us to inform educational policy decision making. It is very important what we are going to see today, because students also need to manage their emotions. They need to develop empathy, cooperate, and also be resilient. Based on the results of the PISA assessment in math and the results of the CES survey, a very high percentage in Chile, close to 12.4 and 12.8% respectively, are students that are resilient, which speaks to us of the fact that students from the most underprivileged students have a high score in the measurements, and this is also part of the decisions of education policy that we've made as a country throughout time. Without a doubt, the world is not the same as 20 years ago, and technology, as I was saying a minute ago, has also connected us, but also has exposed us to the social and emotional challenges that are unprecedented. And 21st century skills are in great part social and emotional skills, and Chile knows that. The importance that we also have related to the OECD, where we have been part of the study since 2010, but from the OECD, but also from the studies from 2000, this allows us to problematize and bring relevant information for decision making. And in this sense, with the Survey in Social and Emotional Skills study, where Chile is the host for the delivery of Volume 2 results, we feel deeply proud of being able to share with all of the Latin American countries and the world who today are also seeing these broadcasts online. So today we are not here just to speak of numbers or statistics. We are here because we also believe in the future of education. We are building educational systems that not only are positioned in the data, but more to the point is because information is a means for education policy decision making and also at the level of the school system. And especially in a world of change, we are here to contribute to the training of people. So this study will allow us to see how can we better help our students in the comprehensive development. And lastly, this is also a call to action. We have said repeatedly that learning can't wait, but learning understood from a broader point of view of quality, where social and emotional development, academic self-esteem, a school environment, civic training, participation and citizenship participation, as it was mentioned here as well, these are all important, and we have seen through the relationship of variables how important they are in the training and the development of students in Chile and the world. That is why we invite you to continue working. Let's continue improving, because the challenges that we have today in the country are also an opportunity in a country and in a world that is ever changing. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much for these words. Gino Cortés, Executive Secretary of the Agency for Quality in Education, to do the second launching of the Survey in Social and Emotional Skills results in Chile is an opportunity to promote the improvement of social and emotional skills and the well-being of students, as well as the participation of countries in the region in the next cycle of the study that will take place in 2026. So we would like to invite Andreas Schleicher, Director of Education and Competences and Special Advisor in Educational Policy of the General Secretariat of the OECD in Paris, so he can provide us with the results of the second volumes on the Survey on Social and Emotional Skills 2023. Andreas, please.
Buenos dias, and I want to start by actually thanking Chile for the leadership, the long-standing leadership in advancing the agenda on social emotional skills. Now, if you think about it, since the pandemic, everybody is talking about social emotional skills, but this has not always been like this. It's been actually a fairly recent agenda in the history of education. I'm really deeply grateful for the leadership that Chile has taken, not just in putting it on the policy agenda, but also trying to make it happen in classrooms. And that's really what this second volume is about. If I can have my slides. There. Thank you very much. Yeah, since the pandemic, everybody's talking about it. But the future will always surprise us. Social emotional skills will become the skills in the 21st century as much as academic skills were the key skills in the 20th century. Climate change is going to disrupt our lives even more than the pandemic did, and artificial intelligence puts our education systems to a real test. The kind of things that have been easy to teach, easy to test, are becoming easy to digitize, automate. They're disappearing from our economies. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are good at repeating what we told them. But what makes us human in this new age? These are the questions we need to ask ourselves. And you can add, many other disruptors that will deeply challenge the way in which we educate young people. Now, how do we balance, on one end, sustainability, not keeping this world in which we live in balance? It's clearly a major challenge for young people, but also helping people to live in a world that is in balance. Very important as well. Can you live with yourself? Can you live and work with people who are different from you? Can you live with this planet, making better choices between the present and the future? I think those are the big questions that we need to address. I want to start with something that is still about academic skills. Now our assessment, we always, I think this microphone is maybe not working with one. We always look at, well, do 15-year-olds do on academic skills? And you can see globally, 15-year-olds get about, close to 60% of the reading tasks that we give them right, and 50% of the mathematics tasks. That's, the cognitive capabilities of 15-year-olds around the world. But when we gave that same test to ChatGPT, we could see actually in reading, artificial intelligence is doing better than humans. Large language modeling is all about, processing information. Even mathematics is harder for technology. Mathematics requires conceptual understanding, modeling. Those things are not so easy for technology. But when we did that 6 months later, it looked like this. And a year later, you could see, even in a field like mathematics, technology has figured out most of the things that people can do at age 15. And that really pushes us to think harder. What makes us human in this age? If you ask yourself, what you expect from a modern education system, the first thing I think is easy, Education should probably help you figure out why you are here on this planet. Now, what is important to you? Now, what do you really want to achieve in this world? Helping young people to find out who they are, who they want to become. Helping them, discover their talents. Where can you become really, really good at? And that's not a trivial task at all. The world these days, gives you lots of signals, but where can you become good at? And that alone doesn't make you happy. The other question is, giving people a deep understanding, how can you make a difference to other people in this world? What does the world need from you? And last but not least, how you can translate, better skills into better jobs and better lives to make a living. That's sort of quite easy to say, but how to make that happen? Well, we have been in the OECD tracking those capabilities for quite some time, and I'll just show you a couple of results from our PISA assessment. You can take a country like Japan. They get 10 out of 10 points on cognitive skills. Reading, mathematics, science. The Japanese are doing amazing on that. Much better than the OECD average, which is a little kind of blue dot here. But when you scratch the surface, you can actually see the Japanese still have a long way to go when it comes to, students' happiness. Students do not feel that strong sense of belonging, sense of identity, social emotional skills. Emotional resilience. Can you reinvent yourself every day in a world that is changing? Also important. So what I'm showing you here, yes, you can be very successful academically, and that used to be incredibly important in the past. But to be prepared for the future, you need to do more than that. Let's have a look at Chile. You can see the yellow bar is a lot shorter than in Japan, even shorter than the OECD. Chile has a long way still to go to upgrade the mathematics, science, reading skills, and so on. But actually, Chile's done quite well on psychological well-being. Students, make friends. They have, a strong sense of belonging, identity, and so on. Agency. Chilean students can do things. They can mobilize resources. They show actually a quite good level of resilience. So once again, different education systems have different strengths, and we need to look at them in balance. When you look at, Japan and Chile, You compare those two bars, you think, yeah, well, maybe we have to make a choice. If we, make students academically talented, they will be very unhappy. And we lose out on the well-being. Or if we focus on well-being, then students end up, not doing so well academically. But, you can look at Denmark. They can actually get, almost everything right. The students are doing quite well academically. They're happy students. They show a great sense of agency. Now, that capacity to do things, to mobilize your cognitive, social, emotional resources. Good resilience. And also, last but not least, they can appreciate different ways of thinking, different ways of working. They are open to different viewpoints. Can we live together in this world as different people? I think those are the big questions. You can actually see, we don't need to see those things as choices. We either do this or that. The question is not, the question is how do we develop social emotional skills through the well-being of students, not at the expense of that. And I think we can see how that is in theory possible. And that's really what this report is about. Earlier this year, Gina, you mentioned already, we published a first volume just looking at what difference do social emotional skills make to the lives of people. Today, we're talking about the really important question, can we make a difference? Can we teach those things? There's still many people around who say, social emotional skills is more like, personality traits. You're born with them, and you can't do very much about it. We're actually demonstrating with this volume that you can learn and teach those kinds of skills. Maybe even, as you will see, maybe it's even easier to teach social emotional skills than teach mathematics. We just have to sort of internalize that those are actually skills, and that's really what this volume is about. And we have a good range of, countries, education systems, sometimes subsystems, taking part in this. So you get a good kind of global picture on how those skills play out in different parts of the world. This is just a reminder from our first edition where we actually showed, how much actually different social emotional skills make for different population groups. You can see they work for 15-year-olds as well, for 10-year-olds, for students from wealthy, from disadvantaged backgrounds, for boys and girls. And I think that's really, really important that you can actually see those social emotional skills do make a difference now. We also see that, students who show greater optimism, more energy, better control of their emotions, you can see they are healthier in their behaviors. They are, show greater psychological well-being. They are less worried about tests. Sometimes we think, let's make school easier, but that's not the question. The question is actually giving students better tools to deal with difficulty. You can see it works out really quite well. That was what we already published, so let's add to this what we can do about it in school. This is what this new volume is about. I want to start with something that we sometimes take for granted. You sit in a classroom in school and you expect your teacher to give you some feedback. No? And actually, what these data show is that the teacher feedback actually makes a big difference for the social emotional skills of students. It's not just telling you you do things well or not well. You can actually see students that got more feedback are more motivated to do well. The feedback is something that gives us that energy. But that's not all. You can see they show greater level of optimism, high levels of trust, more persistence, getting through difficult things. They're more sociable. They show higher levels of curiosity, creativity. It doesn't play out equally in all education systems. You can see the range of the impact varies quite a bit through the kind of systems that we studied. That's also interesting, that those things play out differently. But you can see a number of them work pretty well across countries. So what you do as a teacher beyond being an instructor, in terms of how you give students feedback, really makes a difference on their motivation, on their social emotional skills. In a way, as a teacher, you are a good instructor, but today you need to be a good coach, a good mentor, a good facilitator, a good evaluator, a creative designer of innovative learning environments. That's what we demand from teachers. And where they do that, you can see the difference. How do teachers give feedback? Now, that's also an interesting kind of question. You can look at the relationship to a student's empathy. To what extent does the feedback of teachers actually have a relationship with the empathy that students show, and then achievement motivation. And you can see in general the impact on achievement motivation is clearer. But you can also see students' empathy is quite clearly related, at least in a number of education systems, to that relational, aspect of schooling. What these data show us that schooling is not a transactional business. It's always a social, a relational experience. And where teachers show, that interest in students in terms of feedback, you can really see that also playing out quite well. Not everywhere. Again, you can see in general that is not equally pronounced, but I think it's quite important. So how do teachers give feedback? The most, obvious way of giving feedback is telling students, this is where you're good at. And actually, it's not the most common one. Most teacher feedback actually goes on areas where to improve. You tell students, this is where you're good at. You tell students, this is where you can become better. And interestingly, also on how to improve. What can you do better as a student to master things? And you can see that doesn't play out equally in every education system. Some education systems, you can see that feedback actually more pronounced than in others. But overall, there is a very clear pattern on this. The teachers give more feedback on the what and how to improve than on helping students identify their strengths. Could also be something that gives us, to think about. But it's a quite interesting kind of facet. Now, I come back once more to the pandemic. We ask students, when you work in a digitized work, we ask teachers, when you work in a digitized work, does technology get into the way of social emotional skills, or does it help you, amplify, improve social emotional skills? And the answer from teachers is quite clear when it comes to, the social aspect. Many teachers are really worried that, that technology actually hinders that aspect, particularly in Finland, in Italy, and in Ukraine. And so you can see actually technology is seen as a big barrier to help students develop social skills. It's not so clear in Latin America. It's actually interesting. You can see actually there it's sort of more half-half. Some teachers actually say, well, it can actually foster this. The technology can help us strengthen social relationship. But you can also see a good share of teachers who get quite worried about that. So it's a double-edged sword. Now, I think we can see technology, having sometimes, some positive aspects, but also being seen as a big barrier. When you actually compare that across aspects, now when you look at task performance, teachers are actually more optimistic that technology can become a tool to actually, foster student learning. But also there, it varies a lot across countries. If you go to, again, Italy, Bulgaria, Finland, teachers are more worried than positive. If you go to Peru, interestingly, or Bogota, you can see actually teachers generally see technology can, help us advance task performance of young people. So it plays out differently across different aspects of social emotional learning. That's, I think, a really important aspect. How do we prepare teachers? These things do not fall from the sky. As a teacher, you cannot give what you don't have. So how do you actually help teachers? And you can actually see, when you compare the orange dot with the blue dot, the blue dot is about, how to teach, pedagogy, the kind of, basics of teaching. That is actually lacking in very, very few systems. 13% on average actually lack that. But when you look at the orange, symbol, you can see incorporating social emotional skills in classroom practice. You can see in many education systems, it's a very large group of teachers who say, I haven't learned that. That wasn't part of my kind of curriculum. And you can see, 40% in Chile. That's also, and that is, still a very significant share of teachers who feel, I'm expected to do that, but I haven't really learned it. So I think it gives us some clues on where we can strengthen. But there are also education systems, if you look to Delhi, or if you look to Jinan, or, to Kudus in Indonesia, you can actually say, most teachers say, yeah, it was part of this. I said Chile is a great champion, actually, on the social emotional skills. Delhi in India is as well. You know, India as a whole may still be very traditional in its educational efforts, very content-based, very focused on exams. But, you know, the city and the region of Delhi has for many years actually worked very hard to make this agenda real. And you can see the fruits of some of those things actually coming out of this. How do you actually make social emotional skills a reality? And there are sort of two philosophies of this. Some people say you should really integrate it into everything you do, make it part of everyday teaching. And other people say, you know, you should teach it as a separate subject. And you can see both happening across countries. Some people say, well, you know, you make it more focused if you teach it separately, but the problem with that is, you know, you make it somebody else's responsibility. And many teachers will say, well, you know, there's a specialist, we can outsource that function to another kind of thing, and so on. So the integrated approach is probably the one that will get more prominence, that make it real. Students see this is not a subject, but this is something that is embedded in everything that happens in the school classroom. But you can see both happen. I can give you an example. And if you compare, for example, Dubai, you can see there's a good emphasis on teaching it as a separate subject. You look at Helsinki, they rarely do that. They mostly integrate it into everything they do in the school life. Now, every teacher is actually working towards that goal. But it's clear philosophies differ on that, approaches differ, and the survey brings out how those things are actually different. I wanted to talk about something that is also really important, and that is, do we build an ethos, a shared vision around social emotional skills in schools or not, you know? Is it, you know, the interest of a few teachers in the school that do a great job, or is that something that you can feel when you enter the school? Because every teacher shares that kind of belief. And we actually surveyed that. We looked at, you know, to what extent teachers and school leaders agree on the impact of social skills on the future of young children. And, you know, if that bar is short, if as a teacher you do not believe it's going to make a difference to the lives of people, how would you take it serious in everyday life? No? But you can see actually it's in some countries quite common. No? You can see here in the case of Kudus, in the case of Dubai, Jinan, Delhi, and so on, you can see most teachers in the school agree that it's going to be really important for the future of those kids. No? But if I look at the end, you know, you can see in Japan, in Spain, in Italy, yeah, there are many teachers who believe in that, but it's not that shared culture, that shared mindset of this. And that's something I think education systems have to work on. What you can see, you know, when you enter a good school, what makes a good school great is always that, you know, you have a shared vision. You have something that unites people, something that, you know, creates an identity of the school, a sense of belonging. And so we try to measure this, and you can see this here: increased youth employment and also social inequality. There's also an interesting aspect: to what extent do teachers believe that, you know, this is actually the lever to create a level playing field, to bring people from different social backgrounds together around a common agenda. And you can see, I mean, hugely important topic in Chile as well. But again, you know, in many schools, and I must say, in Chile, that's less an issue than in many other countries on the right side. But still, many schools, it has still not arrived as a mentality, as a mindset in the school. So I think that's something really interesting to observe. Now, when you actually look at the two questions, the shared mindset on student impact, on academic impact, and then, you know, is social emotional skills something that we expect from teachers, where teachers feel responsible for? You can see a good correlation between those two aspects. It's actually really interesting, where actually teachers feel a sense of responsibility to do that. You can also see that it's much more likely to emerge a shared kind of belief that it is going to make a difference. So that, I think, is a very, very important part of this, that the idea that, you know, it's not a nice to have an additional extra, but it's, you know, our responsibility to make that happen, that teachers actually have a responsibility for developing social emotional skills. And behind, of course, is that belief that they can be taught. Now, if you believe that these are, you know, personality traits, you know, some children are born very empathic and others less, so then of course you will never attribute it to yourself, to your own work. No? So behind that is a kind of clear sense that there is a sense of responsibility behind that. So let's look at the kind of school environment. We looked at the teachers and what teachers can do. Let's look at how schools can create an environment for social emotional skills to emerge. And what you can see here, first of all, is where students have the sense that the sense of belonging. They they report much stronger social emotional skills here. They are more sociable. If you feel you belong to the school, you make friends easily, you connect with other people. Sociability is closely related to this, but also, the other variables that I highlighted in their importance, a sense of optimism. I think that's the biggest poison of, the world of young people today, that they grow up with so many bad news and so many difficulties that they lose that sense of agency and optimism. And you can see, actually, if you as a school can create a shared sense of belonging in the school, you're much more likely to see your schools being optimistic, to feel that energy, to feel that trust, to be resistant to crisis, and also to be more motivated in terms of doing better in the schooling system. So here you can really see how important it is that schools do more than just broadcast stuff, that they actually create that kind of foundation for young people to feel a sense of identity, belonging, and so on. So you can see that for sense of belonging, you can see that for positive emotion, for actually also less negative emotions. That's the kind of mirror image. Correlation is actually quite consistent across those kinds of different aspects. One of the things that we see is that girls feel less confident in school, and it's pretty much visible across systems. Some exceptions, Delhi, you don't see that, but still you can see in many education systems actually being quite a big gap when you look at girls and boys on feeling confident either half of the time. There are also differences across countries. You can look, for example, here in Peru and Bogota. In general, students feel confident. That's great. I think that's, again, something very important. In some other countries, overall, they feel less confident. But the gender gap is really quite consistent across this. Something that we also find in other international surveys. You can see that gender inequality and students belonging, also quite, important. There's much more often an advantage for boys than there is an advantage for girls, but there are exceptions. If you look again to Delhi in India, you can see it doesn't play out as much as it plays out in other education systems. Low-performing students often feel less positive about school. That's something we should also keep in mind. When you're constantly probably getting bad news in school, you lose your kind of sense of confidence in this and positiveness, and you can see that actually plays out in many education systems, and in some less strong. Chile is one of those examples, so I think that's actually a quite a positive picture on this, but it's something that we need to work on, that low-performing students, it's not about lowering the expectations or the aspirations for them, but to give them a stronger sense of, feeling positive and making meaning out of what they do in school, that they do not get lost in this. This is the kind of mirror image. You can see low-performing students often struggle more with anger in school. Again, something that is quite consistent across education systems. The orange triangle is much more pronounced than the blue dot for the high performers. So again, something that we need to work on. Anger, is one of the big barriers that you can see to many aspects of social emotional well-being. I wanted to come to something that is also really, really important. How do you relate to your peers? And how does that change between the ages of 10 and 15? I cannot show you this for all systems because in the case of Chile, we do not have data for the younger kids, but where we do this, you can actually see my classmates are respectful to me, a little bit less for 10-year-olds than for 15-year-olds. So respect for peers seems to be growing. But when you look at the caring, you can actually see for the 15-year-olds, it seems to diminish. And that's something I think we should worry about. You expect when you go to school, the longer you go to school, the better you come out, but it doesn't seem to be true for everything. There are some aspects where actually, schools, do not help to develop this. And this caring aspect as students grow older is one of the things that we should, take to heart, particularly in countries where the gap is very big. You can see Sobral, you can look at Bogota. I think those are systems where you can see there's actually quite a big drop in that caring aspect as students grow from 10 to 15-year-olds. Teachers. Now, before we talked about peers, now we look at teachers. You can see actually when it comes to respect, not much difference between 10 and 15-year-olds. But when it comes to care, if I walked into my classroom upset, my teacher would worry about that, would be concerned about it. Here you can see the data for 15-year-olds, and here you can see the data for 10-year-olds. 10-year-olds perceive their teachers as caring, 15-year-olds a lot less. Again, that's something, we should think about. Why is it like this? Why does school, for small children, it seems to be really a social enterprise. Children are happier, they feel this caring environment, and then as they grow older, it becomes more and more transactional. Very, very, I think, a powerful kind of chart, and you can see that's pretty consistent across countries. There is something in schooling that takes away some of the social fabric as students get older, at least in the systems for which we can make those comparisons between 10 and 15-year-olds. Let's get to bullying. That's, of course, on the extreme side, of the social aspect of schooling. Here you can see the share of students who are a victim, who are a perpetrator, and who are both. And actually you can see in many instances, it's not so clear, what you are. You can actually be both. And if you look at Latin America, the numbers are not the largest in comparison. But you talk about a good third of the students. You think you have a classroom? 1/3 of the students has been on either side of it or on both sides of the bullying aspects. And why do I show you this? Because we actually see that often that is something that doesn't get noticed in school. Here you can see on the horizontal axis the share of students who report to be bullied. And on the vertical axis where the principals, talk about this. And you can see, for example, if you look to Delhi, to Bulgaria, to Kudus, it's prevalent in the school. Now, students usually, give you a good picture of what actually happens. And school principals give you a picture of what they, believe is happening. And you can see there's a gap between those. And actually, in many countries, we need to do better to align, create a better sense of reality, create awareness for bullying. Sometimes you don't see what you do not know, or what you don't like to see. And I think to ensure that the reality, what happens, is better reflected in the school policies and practice is really, I think, an important agenda in many countries, and a few really an extremely urgent agenda. Why do I talk about this? Because you can see very, very clearly, for all aspects, you can see students feel a lower sense of responsibility. Both, in most areas, it goes in the same direction for the victim and the perpetrator. Isn't that interesting? No. You can see they feel, less responsibility, poorer control over their emotions, less trust, less achievement motivation, less self-control, less persistence. The only area that's really interesting where you can see the victim and the perpetrator come out very differently is on empathy. That's perhaps not so surprising. If you have a perpetrator, you probably feel less empathy, what is cause and effect. I don't know, but that is not so unexpected. But that's the only area where you can see things go in a different direction. But otherwise, you can clearly see how bullying works against the kind of social emotional skills in school. Now, we need to work harder on that. Last point I want to address is gender stereotypes. Something I think a really, really important picture that comes out of this when you actually see that across systems, boys are more likely to agree with gender stereotypes in girls, no? But even girls agree to a large extent with gender stereotypes. No? You can see, for example, girls are more sensitive than boys. That's not just what boys believe. You can see also a very large share of girls believe that. Or women are better prepared to care for children, or girls are more empathic than boys, and so on. So there is a greater belief in gender stereotypes among boys, but I would say also high belief among girls in gender stereotypes. What you also see is that in a few education systems here on the left side, you can see almost every second boy agreeing to that leadership is more important for men than for women. But once again, you also see a fair share of girls believing in those things. It's not just, boys believing that they are the better leaders, but also girls believing that men are better than this. But interesting, when you look at Latin America, that's actually much less visible. There you can actually see that kind of belief in, leadership is something actually quite equally pronounced among boys and girls, and actually the stereotypes are quite low on that. So I think that's a strength of the system in the regions. Boys are more likely to agree with gender stereotypes about access to resources, holding a university degree. That's not, that's more common, much more common among boys than among girls. It's interesting because in reality, there are more women now graduating from university than men. But you can see in the minds of children, it's still sort of in the old pattern. But you can see generally, I think, there's still a lot of work to do to combat, perceptions about, access to resources among boys and girls. In some of the sites, you can also see gender stereotypes need to be addressed for both boys and girls. And I think that's, if you look to Guma in Japan, you can see actually both boys and girls share those kinds of gender stereotypes. In other education systems, you can see that the orange triangle for boys is much more pronounced than the blue dot for girls. Now, this is about the percentage of 15-year-olds agreeing that having a well-paying job is more important for men. More boys believing that, but in some education systems, the gap is not so different. Once again, it's an area where Latin America comes out well. You can see actually that that stereotype is not as pronounced in the mind of young people. Belief that women are better prepared to care for children, also that, is perhaps a more obvious kind of variable, but also you can see in some education systems it's really very prevalent, both among boys and girls. The gender gap on that is actually not as pronounced as it is for some of the other dimensions. When both parents participate in domestic tasks, we can see that gender stereotypes are less visible. So when children experience at home, their parents actually are equally, sharing those kinds of tasks. You can see actually gender stereotypes are usually much less pronounced. And what is interesting in this is that effect is stronger for boys. When the boys see at home that both parents share responsibility, it has an even stronger effect on reducing their gender stereotypes than it has for girls. So there's a lot that society can do about diminishing those kinds of stereotypes. And we also see in general where responsibilities in the family are shared, you can see students generally coming out with stronger social emotional skills, more tolerance, greater optimism, more persistence, stress resistance, a sense of responsibility, achievement, motivation, almost anything that we measured comes out, quite well predicted by the degree to what extent, this is everybody's kind of business. That's all what I wanted to share with you. You kind of find a lot more data and indicators in our report. It's a really interesting addition. In the spring, once again, we showed that social emotional skills make a difference for the lives of people later in their lives. Now we can actually demonstrate there's a lot that we can do about this. That is a lot depends on what teachers are and who they are in the classroom. how they relate to their students. Very, very important. The school kind of environment that we create, to what extent do we create a kind of shared responsibility, shared mission about it? To what extent do we give teachers the preparation for that? No? But last but not least, as families, we also have great influence on many of those kinds of outcomes. And that's why it's so important to make that everybody's business. Thank you very much. Gracias.
Te agradecemos.
Thank you very much for the presentation to the Director of Education and Competences and Special Advisor in Educational Policy of the OECD, Mr. Anders Schleicher. And we would like to tell you that in the agencia.educacion.cl you'll be able to find this very interesting presentation that we just witnessed. We would like to greet as well to Sebastián Izquierdo, Academic Coordinator or SEP and former Executive Secretary of the Agency for Quality in Education, and we would also like to thank his presence and also say farewells to the Undersecretary of Preschool Education, Claudia Lagos, who has other affairs pending. We would like to greet now to the panel members who are going to be going deeper into the results of the study together with Andreas, and we would like to invite them to take a seat. See if we're going to be putting this as seats. Now we invite Mauricio Farias, Superintendent of Education. Mauricio is a civil industrial engineer with an MA in economics and a PhD in education. Thank you very much for your participation. We also like to greet Roberto Ricci, President of Invalsi in Italy, who is going to be joining us online. Eri Shimamukai, researcher and CEO of Roku U Inc. in Japan, and Jennifer Adams, Executive Committee of Karanga Global Alliance for SEL and Life Skills. Thank you very much to each one of you. And we'd like to invite again to Andreas Schleicher, Education Director and Competence Director and Special Advisor in Education Policy of this General Secretariat of the OECD, who's going to be moderating this conversation.
Working. Good? Yes, I look forward to actually around those kinds of findings here. And I want to start with you, Jennifer. You have been a great champion of this work, one of the architects of work on social emotional learning around the world, and through your work at Karanga and many initiatives. But very importantly, you've also been in the driver's seat of an actual school system, where you had to not just talk about those things, but make those happen. And when you look at the results from Ottawa, where you can see among young children, 10-year-olds, they're happy children, social emotional skills are very much part of their life. And then you can see those things diminishing as children grow older. You can see 15-year-olds less empathic, less curious, less, showing less agency. What makes that, happen in you? Someone who wants schools to contribute to the development of people and not take things away from them.
Thank you, Andreas. And first of all, thank you very much to the Chilean group, a warm welcome. And just in the opening comments, I see that there's a lot in common. The goals that you have for your students and your teachers and your families, very similar to what we have in Canada. As Andreas mentioned, well, I'm a little bit overwhelmed still by how much information was presented. I know, I can only imagine that you're doing the same thing with me as how can we react and make sure that we're making our systems better. And Andreas, one of the things that I will mention is that a huge advantage with having taken part in the first cycle of the study was that we had the opportunity well before we received the results to start thinking about some of the challenges in our system. And we knew, Andreas, that in some ways our elementary teachers were better prepared to be moving and making that slide to be not only focusing on academic skills, but on social emotional skills as well. Some of the challenges that they had, and I would be surprised if they're not similar to what's in Chile. First of all, we know that our elementary teachers are generalists. And so in their teacher education, they're thinking very much about the whole child. our secondary teachers are focused very much on the subject specialty. And so they think about teaching the subject versus teaching the student. And so we knew that we had to help them make that shift. The second challenge that our secondary teachers had was the fact, a real focus on grades and the perception that their main goal is to try to have their students be prepared for post-secondary education. So that mindset was a challenge. And the third was basically the structure of our secondary schools, where it's very much siloed. And so it's subject by subject by subject. So what did we begin doing about it from the very beginning? I think the first thing was some of the knowledge that came out of the early evidence with the study. When we talked to our secondary teachers and our secondary principals, and we learned that social emotional skills are malleable. First of all, they can be taught. You talked about the perception that it might be personality. It's not. They can actually be taught. And secondly, especially compared to cognitive skills, they're malleable right into early adulthood. And that gave our high school teachers the sense that, yes, they have a role to play. The second piece I would say that we had to focus on was curriculum policy. And so in our rewrites of policy, we have built social emotional skills right into the different subject areas. So that idea that it gives teachers the permission at the secondary level to actually be focusing on that. And the third thing, and the last thing I'll comment, is the whole concept of pedagogy. And if we have done a lot of professional learning with our secondary teachers about the idea of having a more open pedagogy, where when they're teaching their subject area, they have children interacting. Students have more agency in how they're learning and what they're learning. And that whole focus on trying to make sure that students have a voice, and that's happening at secondary schools and not only in elementary schools. So those are just some examples, and I'm sure we'll get more into it.
So interesting. What I take away, primary school teachers loving children and secondary school children loving the subject. No, I think that's something probably.
Well, and I want to just a very quick comment. We have amazing teachers in secondary schools, and I think we as policymakers and as district and regional leaders, we have to give them permission to do those kinds of things in the classroom and focus on one of the points that you made in the study was the idea of teacher feedback being so important. We've had a real shift to focusing on formative assessment while the students are learning. Here's what we know about what you're doing, here's the positive things, and here's some important next steps, as opposed to what the practice was years ago of focusing on summative assessment, where it was the end, they found out if they got it or they didn't, and that was the end, they turned the page. So a real push and support for our secondary teachers and our elementary teachers on the importance of formative assessment and that ongoing feedback in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think you identified actually a whole range of tools, from bringing teachers closer together through integrating the curriculum, teaching across the boundaries, and I think the assessment evaluation practice is clearly a big part. I think there's a lot of tools that probably we have that create an environment where teachers in different grades do this. Let me turn to you, Maurizio. You have been on this journey for many years, and you have a good tradition in Chile actually working on social emotional skills in schools. If you were a new country getting on this journey, what would you advise them? Many will tell you, we are already doing too many things, the curriculum is crowded and so on, but you have done that. If a country starts on this, what would be your advice?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. There's a lot of information and very good and nice information to analyze. So I would say that to fix and define goals, define metrics, define how to assess them, and also policies. I think in Chile we have defined these metrics, these goals. We are assessing the social emotional skills. Also, we have defined some policies to go deeper and strengthen this kind of skills. For instance, in the gender stereotypes or gender bias, gender discrimination. We have defined, even at the governmental level, goals for all the ministries in the sector. And in education, we have defined also goals in this, and we have been measuring this, for instance, including in the curriculum, including in the assessment, including in policies. We in the superintendence of education, we also have defined some rules. We are also inspecting the schools, even sometimes we don't like it, but also putting some fines on the schools who are not fulfilling the legal definitions that the country has made on this. So defining the goals, going deeper with that, define assessment, and making policies that force the schools, of course not always forcing, but promoting this. It has been like a very good way to advance in this.
Any inspiration you get from other countries?
Yeah, sure.
For work in Chile? Sure.
There is a lot of information, and for instance, how do we improve the feedback? We are doing good in that, but when you look you said before, the way on how we highlight the students' strengths, it's one of the things that we could improve. Sometimes maybe it's a cultural thing that we focus on not on the strengths, but on the weak things or weak skills, right? So at every level, if you want to change this, making the school leaders, the teachers look at the strength, it's something that we have to learn. Also, I would like to highlight the idea that having a shared vision about the impact of social and emotional skills is important. And in order to have this shared vision, you need in the communities to save time, to give the time to the teachers to discuss about this, to have just one vision how to improve this, not the very maybe different visions, but talking with dialogue, trying to put all together and put one goal is something that we have to learn and maybe to improve this.
Thank you, but I actually find your approach of making some of those issues part of the whole of government a really interesting angle. Now, if students see gender stereotypes, it's not just important in school, they see it around themselves, they see it happening in different policy fields. I think that's a really interesting approach, I think, to see education as part of the broader picture. You highlighted the point of measurement, and maybe that's a good moment for us to bring Roberto into this discussion. Welcome, Roberto. You have really been one of the pioneers of measurement, really one of the global leaders in this field, also in the area of social emotional skills. And the data actually, I thought, revealed some very interesting patterns about Italy as well. One of the things that struck me that on the one hand, teachers in Italy feel a clear sense of responsibility for developing social emotional skills. On the other hand, Italy came out quite low when it comes to impact. Teachers believing that those things will actually make a difference. And how do you use evidence data actually to shape that, expectation, aspiration of teachers?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm sorry not to in person. And I would like to say that it is impressive how more or less we are sharing the same problems. And I do believe that the data could help us a lot in order to, how can I say, to share with our teachers that we are more or less on the same page, and they are not alone. And again, for us in Italy, but I think that this experience could be more or less the same, at least could be shared in other countries as well. It was and it is very important to show the teachers and to school practitioners, to teacher trainings experts and so on, how this kind of skills, if we may express ourselves in this way, are related also with the curriculum and with the traditional teaching and learning at school. So I think data could be a very good tool in order to show that it's possible to strike a balance. It's possible to have innovation without leaving out or outside the fundative aspects of our systems. And again, I think the data could be and are for our experience very important to show to the policymakers, to the stakeholders, how they are important in order to set the training for the future teachers. From my perspective, and by reading the data, I would like to say that we should go in that direction, not to have a specific topic, social and emotional skills, because for me and what I can understand from the data, it would be a bit how can I say, I'm looking for a polite expression, not so fruitful approach, let's say in this way. And it would be not so productive in order to give the message that the social and emotional skills are a responsibility for all the teachers, for all the system. And last but not least, I would like to say that the data show us quite clearly that the social and emotional skills could be crucial, strategic, extremely relevant in the first years of the life of our kids in order to face efficiently the effect of different social backgrounds. We shared this discussion several times, but I have to say, after more than 20 years of international surveys, it is to me, the data shows quite clearly that we should maybe invest more in this kind of skills, especially in the first year of schooling, starting from age 0. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto, and I think I couldn't agree with your emphasis on providing teachers with better insights, better data on this. And there's often a perception that social emotional skills are something opaque. You can't really it's not tangible, it's not measurable, and let's face it, we will not change, we will not improve what we can't see. It's only making those skills visible that we provide tools for teachers actually to do something about it. And I think we have to become a lot better in finding better tools to do that. And in a way, I think 200 years ago, we probably would have said you can't measure mathematics skills. We worked on that, we made it happen, and I think today this is the moment where we have to become perhaps also more creative in creating better measurement. I found your point also really interesting, that this is an agenda that starts very early and that can be a very powerful lever to foster social equity. I think giving all children that sense that they can make a difference, that they have a role to play and develop those kinds of skills and counter social background. I do think that's it's something that we haven't yet looked as prominently in our analysis, but I think it deserves a good analysis how those things play out, but for children from different social backgrounds. I want to come to you, Ari, and I must actually say, from all the classrooms I've visited around the world, I've been most impressed in Japan by the level of care that teachers have for their students. You can, ask a teacher in Japan about, the life history of any student, and they will know. They will know who their students are. They will know who their students want to become. They will know how to accompany them in their journey. I know many Japanese teachers who spend more time outside the classroom with students in clubs and social activities than they spend inside the classroom with them. I think it's a great example how this agenda has been very, very natural to school. Tell us more about what is behind that in Japan and the kind of policies that you've been involved in this field.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting this event, and thank you for sharing your perspective on the Japanese education. Although that all the data showed the Japanese, the challenges in terms of the social emotional skills, we have a lot of good sides of the education. as you mentioned, the teacher know everything, I mean, a lot of things about students, but then on the other hand, teachers spend too much time on working with students. So the big agenda for Japanese education is now the overworking of the teachers. And the Japanese Ministry of Education is really putting a huge focus on how to decrease the amount of work of teachers. So that's, from my perspective, that hinders the Japanese education to work more on a social emotional aspect, because still the academic performance is the, how can I say, the biggest factor that teacher needs to care about. So that's the huge, the kind of the pressure for teachers and students as well. And as the data showed, many teachers in Japan do not seem to be aware of the significance and responsibility of enhancing students' social emotional skills. So it seems that they are often not interested in it rather than resisting it. So that's like the reaction that I have from the teachers and the schools. Underlining this is the lack of an easy and memorable Japanese word of corresponding to social emotional skills. So we always say social emotional learning, social emotional learning. Like, you know, it's still English word. So it's kind of the teachers and educators feel, oh, unfamiliar to the concept. But at the same time, I get frequently receive the question, what is so how the SEL is different from moral education? So the teachers believe that, oh, we really good on, you know, understanding, caring students, and also work hard on moral education. So like, do we still need to do the social emotional learning? So that's the big questions that we have, and that's like the behind the challenges we face.
Yeah, but you know, I'm you know, perhaps more positive. You know, for example, when we assessed, you know, social problem-solving skills in PISA, Japanese students came out very well. They actually knew how to work with other kids, whereas in the Western world, many kids were at a loss when we asked them to work together to solve a problem. So I think that in reality, and you know, some of the, you're quite right, there's some of the kind of results quite low for Japan, but I often ask myself, is it maybe because teachers are more self-aware? You know, if you immediately come out very positive on something, sometimes, you know, there's a naive optimism, whereas I think in the case of Japan, probably teachers are more aware. But I want to, you know, you mentioned something really interesting, the workload that comes with this, and I think that's a clear issue. You know, our data show for Japanese teachers have an extremely high workload, but what we can see now, the discussion in Japan is largely about reducing the workload by cutting on the activities that actually foster social emotional skills. They don't talk about cutting mathematics or science, the reductions and reducing teacher workload is actually about limiting the scope that teachers have to do what they do so well, namely caring about students. Is that something that you think about, or?
Definitely. So as he mentioned, definitely the teachers need the space and time to think of what's the significance and what's the goal of education itself. Teachers have too much pressure on, like, you know, enhancing students' academic performances. So they definitely need the dialogue, a time to dialogue on the significance of education.
You know, I want to come back once more to you, Roberto. Again, you have been involved in so many international studies, not just the survey on social emotional skills. And I think more than anyone, you'll be aware of still significant skepticism that exists to measuring social emotional skills. And, you know, we have about 100 countries measuring mathematics globally through instruments like PISA, and 2 dozens who engage in this project. So I think we still have a way to go to make this as normal and intuitive as the measurement of cognitive skills. But I think one of the things that you have done in amazing ways in Italy is actually bring data to schools. You know, in many education systems, there's a lot of assessment. They are, you know, we produce wonderful reports, and ministries, look at that, but often those data do not flow back into, classrooms and teachers. And I think you do that really well in the case of Italy. Tell us a bit more about this. How do you use data to strengthen capacity and engagement with social emotional skills at the front line, in the schools, in the classrooms?
Thank you for this question, because I too believe this is really crucial. We have to involve schools, again, showing them, to the teachers, school principals, but also parents and students, how these skills are strongly related with their normal life or regular life in school and outside the schools. And in our case, but I think more or less the same, because at the end of the day, teachers are interested, very involved in the idea to improve the level of learning of their students. And if with the data can show them how also these kind of skills are part of their teaching activity, this is crucial, again. And I do believe also that if you are able to reach schools, potentially each individual schools is a way to show them that is possible, that is feasible. And there is another aspect that is for me and in our experience, and we collected several data with questionnaires and so on, the feeling, the sense of belongings, not only for the students, but also for the teachers. Because we are, I do believe, extremely right when we speak how it is important for the students, the sense, the feeling of belonging, but we should not forget that it is also extremely important for the teachers. And if they have their data that they can use according to their specific needs, is a way to have the feeling that they are part of the system, not that something requested from outside, an additional request that is overwhelming for them. And our hope, have to say, this is the coming goals, to help teachers in order to find spaces, time in their activities. Because we should say, if we want really and significantly develop this kind of skills, we should also find time, opportunity to do that. And again, the data is important, because if we can show them with strong evidences that by going this direction, we are also reaching other important goals, it helps a lot. And I do believe that we should rely on the strong professionalism of our teachers and share with them the data is extremely, extremely important and fruitful. And I would like to add at the end, is also our duty as a system. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Andres and Roberto, I think what I learned from the system in Chile, that you have the assessment that is happening 3 times a year at all grade levels, where the schools are getting that information. I think that that's absolutely in line, Roberto, with what you were saying. How do we get this information not only at the governmental level, but right into our schools? And it seems like Chile is doing an amazing job with that, and all the countries will be able to learn from that experience.
Yeah, thank you. Roberto, you put it, it's data, time, and opportunity. Let me come to area on that question of opportunity. I mean, you have spent a lot of work on social entrepreneurship in education, agency, empathy, and I found the results actually quite interesting, particularly on empathy. Japan, or I should say, in this case, it's the Gunma prefecture, but it shows actually a good relationship between feedback teachers, give to students and the empathy that students report and feel. And it's actually not visible in many education systems, but in the case of Kuma, it comes out quite clearly. At the same time, on other things, like when you look at service learning or, those kinds of project-based learning, that's still quite novel in Japan. Your plans to close that gap?
Thank you very much. So, I was trying to share the most successful example of introducing social emotional learning in Japan. So, which is, that is the embedding into SEL into the inquiry-based learning, project-based learning. There are many social emotional skills at the foundation of the inquiry-based learning. For example, such as the self-awareness that students realize, oh, this is what I'm interested in, for example, and also collaboration skills to be connected with the people in the team and also in the society. So since inquiry-based learning became compulsory in all of the Japanese high school in 2022, it has become much easier to introduce SEL as a foundation for inquiry-based learning. So successful schools have been seen students become more proactive, their voices heard, and the school environment became more active and comfortable for them, and leading to improved academic performances and attendance rates. But the thing is, so the Japanese school has less opportunity to for students to just go outside of the school. So the reason why the number of opportunity for students is limited is the teachers are transferred every 3 years. And so the PTOs are not connected to the local community or human resources there. And also people believe that, the teachers believe that they cannot change the curriculum flexibly. Although it's not. People just, the teachers just believe in it. So what I'm trying to do is, I'm based in Okinawa Prefecture, and what we are trying to do in Okinawa is to create the regional human resources mentor bank. This is a system that matches local human resources with the theme and needs of the schools, and assist the teachers to planning the lessons. And we are also considering creating a fund to operate this system with the money of the citizens. This will not only open schools to society, but also allow citizens to feel more involved in education. So that's the strategy that we are trying to do it.
Really interesting. I was. We have our Education 2030 project at the OECD on the future of education, and where Japanese schools engage in project-based learning out of school, they do actually an amazing job. We did this in Fukushima, Iwate prefectures, and I was actually very impressed. But it seems that curriculum is still quite constraining and perceived. I also thought your point is interesting. On the one hand, you can see the merits of moving teachers around the system and enhancing equity and fairness in the system and ensure that difficult schools get great teachers. But I can see the downsides of that also clearly in making it more difficult for teachers to get rooted in the local communities. It's an interesting kind of question. I want to come to human rights here, thinking about the future of our survey on social emotional skills. There is going to be a next round, a third round, soon, and it will put emphasis on two aspects. One is, as you can expect, the use of technology, artificial intelligence. Will artificial intelligence technology enhance social emotional skills, or will it become, a barrier to this? And the other area that we want to look at is teachers' social emotional skills and how they relate to students' social emotional skills. It's a difficult area to address, but one that we should probably take serious. When you have a mathematics lesson, you expect your teacher to be really, really good in mathematics. And we take it for granted. We train them well. When it comes to social emotional skills, we still often say to them, oh, you're going to do a good job, just go into the classroom and figure it out. And so we want to look at that relationship more clearly, how do the skills of teachers actually influence and shape the skills of students. When you think about Chile, how are you working on that and those capacity issues among the teaching profession?
Yeah, so I would like to start saying something. You know that in our institution, in the superintendency, we receive a lot of difficult situations, all the requirements from the community, and complex situations, sometimes very ugly situations, I would say. And what we are trying to foster is the way to solve these situations in the community without broken the community, and trying to make them again to overcome the situations in the better way, in the good way. And when we do that, we realize that the social-emotional skills are key for that. And also we receive this from internet situations, in the internet space. So what we want to do is to improve the way that the society and the teachers can overcome these situations. In this sense, I would like to say that we are working with that with teachers. We are improving these social-emotional skills. We are also fostering the communities to talk and to dialogue to overcome these situations. And I would like to make maybe the parallel. In our society, in our world, we are seeing also countries like polarizing, and the development of these social-emotional skills are key to overcome also these situations. I think in the future, developing these skills is more important, or is the way to overcome these situations, to make the countries and make the societies, make the school communities to make this go through and solve this. So that's for me the importance and the way to how to address this, how to measure this, to solve difficult situations at the school level, at the country level, at the world level. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting perspective, and I think I think most education systems face that very similar challenge, how to make those, dimensions more systemic, how to embed them in the culture of education,
right,
not just in specific policies and practices. I think it's a really interesting kind of perspective, and that, maybe also leads us to the question what we can do globally. And Jennifer, you have been a leader in this field globally as well. Your alliance around social emotional skills, work on Karanga, you've traveled to many countries, seeing how they struggle with those issues, what they do, what they can learn from and with each other. And I'd be really interested in your thought, what we could do globally to advance the gender. In many other areas of education, we have very strong networks. Science teachers are well connected within education, across education. They're actually very well connected with the field of science as well. And maybe less in history, subjects that are more culturally bound, but I think certainly in many subjects we have a strong tradition of connecting. In the field of social emotional skills is still very, isolated. I think your network is really the only prominent field. But where do you see the future of global collaboration in this field?
So I think that's a really good point, and it's actually not surprising when you think of the networks around subject areas. In some ways, you can understand how those have been developed because it's working with one group of teachers and one group of curriculum specialists, and it's easy to create a global network in that way. Social emotional learning is different. And I love the point that Ari was making, was that there's not even a word in Japanese for social emotional learning. So actually, the group that we got together with, and I'll talk just very briefly about it, there were a group of people that came around this idea that social emotional learning is incredibly important in all of our education systems. And we came up with the name karanga, which is a word that comes from the Maori language in New Zealand, which means a coming together. So we thought it was important to have A, the name being something other than English, and B, something that was reflective of indigenous populations that bring people together. And that's what a network is, right? The second thing that we learned was that we couldn't call it just the Global Alliance for Social Emotional Learning, because our colleagues in India, our colleagues in Africa, our colleagues in Southeast Asia said that that doesn't exist, and so we added on social emotional learning and life skills. To make a long story short, why is that really important? Because we have to help in advocacy. We have to be able to get the word out about how important this is. And most importantly, I think it's an opportunity to talk about our different contexts and how implementation takes place. And I'm hearing some of the things that we've talked about here today. Chile has an amazing opportunity to create networks internally around the information that you're getting from those well-being surveys 3 times a year. Ari has networks happening in Japan around a policy change that mandated in high schools inquiry-based and project-based learning. We at the global level, the OECD has done an incredible job of making this a credible international conversation around the importance of social emotional learning. And I think Karanga, which is a group, and I will certainly invite any of you to be part of that, it's just an informal network of people around the world that either have policy jobs or school jobs or academic research that talk about that. And we're very looking forward to working with Chile and working with the OECD and other countries that are involved. There is an incredible opportunity to build a global understanding of where we need to be going and hearing about the differences and how we can get that for the betterment of our students, the betterment of our teachers, and the betterment of our communities.
You know, I think informality is always a great strength. You know, it brings the dynamism and creativity into process. But you looking forward, don't you think there is a time that, you know, this needs to become more systematically embedded in culture and practice?
Absolutely. I think the best movements start informally, and in order for them to reach their maturity, we really need to be putting those structures in place. So that's where the participating countries, when we think of the 2 cycles of the Survey for Social Emotional Learning, I think we had 9 or 10 countries the first time, or subsections of the countries, and then 19, 23. So we have quite 23 countries that have participated, and I think that's a great starting point for formalizing some cooperation across the countries. What have we learned? What's important in our context? How are we getting that done? We can learn immensely just in the very brief conversations I've had. I'm already writing notes for my colleagues back in Canada based on what's happening in Chile. So yes, I think it's time. I think we've reached a point where we have the evidences there of the importance, the link between social emotional learning and the impact it has on academic learning and the way it happens and its impact on social emotional learning. We have the academics, we have the evidence, and now it's time to move forward with global cooperation.
Very good. So if you have one thing that you think we should do next, what would it be for you, the top priority?
So I'm going to say one thing, when we haven't talked about this yet. I think we need to go beyond the education sector. Some of the work that we've done through Karanga is the impact that we can have working with the business community. We know that business CEOs are saying that the most important skills that they need coming into their companies are strong social emotional skills. They talk about social emotional skills being what happens, how they hire and how they fire. If that's not going well, so the business community, The other is the health sector. The health sector, I'm the chair of the board with the University of Ottawa. They're doing an amazing piece of research on the impact between brain health and heart health, and that they're thinking about education systems and how they can help students develop the skills to have better brain health and better heart health. So we've got health sector that's now aligned with this. I think it's time for public discourse across education, health, economics, and business. I think there's a major conversation here, and we can be very aligned.
Yeah, and you make a really important point, and I have the same experience. This is not a difficult agenda with business leaders. I mean, most leaders in business understand the importance of, people who are, can think for themselves, who can work with others, who, are creative and have all of those kinds of skills. It's actually harder discussion and discourse with educators often. No?
But educators will be influenced. And I go back to that conversation at the beginning. High school teachers are absolutely perceive that they have to be preparing their students for post-secondary and for the world of work. If they hear it, not from the education policy makers, but if they hear it from the businesses saying, this is important, this is what we need you working on, they'll be more likely to move to that inquiry-based approach in their high schools, because they'll have permission to do it, permission from the policymakers and permission from the businesses that are saying this is what we need with our students.
Roberto, let me ask you the same question. If there is one thing that we can do together, what would it be for you in this field? You're on mute. I think, Roberto, you are muted.
No. Sorry. Typical situation. Start to speak without open the mic. And I think we should cooperate, I have no doubt about that, in order to make clear to school system and I think general public that we are not speaking about moral education, but we are speaking about developing skills that are extremely important for the professional life, the future life of our students. But again, I would like to think that it's important to involve parents and teachers in order to show them how this kind of skills could be fruitful and important right now at school, not only in the future. And we should use the data in order to show that, for me at least.
Thank you, Roberto. And also instruments like PISA are making increasing use out of the social emotional skills now. In fact, the next PISA report that we will be publishing in just a few weeks is all about social emotional learning. It's about the attitudes and aspirations young people have for learning in their life. And you can see actually the social emotional qualities are the important predictors for that. No? I think it's a really, really important kind of agenda. Maurizio, your take on that question. One thing that we can do together on this, or should be doing.
So for me, clarifying concepts, arriving to school communities and making them to talk again about this and understand, and then put some goals. It's like the way to go for me, like very simple, but like trying to challenge the communities, trying to challenge the countries to go forward in this.
Yeah, and the very first word that you use, clarifying concepts, I think is really important. Creating a kind of shared language around this. And I must say that has been our principal motivation at the OECD for, instituting the survey, is to create a kind of shared set of definitions, shared metrics that allow us to see, the world through, so that we can have a shared reality around this. And I think we still have a way to go on that. People still interpret the same words in very different ways on this.
I remember some years ago that we were trying to go forward with this, and the concepts were not clear. We didn't know how to measure this. And now we have these tools to assess and to measure and clarifying. And still, as you said, still we need to improve these definitions, to maybe increase what is all the social emotional skills. We have here a group of them, but there are some others that we need to develop still more. So that's a big challenge.
You know, I believe, you know, the next few years we'll see a revolution in this field, in the improvement of our measurement of social emotional skills. Probably even today, you know, your mobile phone may know more about your social emotional skills than yourself, you know. I think if we just were able to harness those kinds of data. And Ari, let me conclude this panel with you. If you look to the future, what's the one thing that you think we should advance?
First of all, to share all the data and discussion with the Minister of Education back in Japan, and also the governments and superintendents that we managed to. And the biggest thing is there are so many networks of resources on how to implement the social emotional learning. For example, lesson plans and stuff online, but then there are not that many shared knowledge on how to make policies and how to make a climate or atmosphere of promoting social emotional skills with not just education field but also economic and all different kinds of fields. So maybe create opportunity or network to share those kind of knowledge around that area.
Thank you all. I want to thank all the panelists here. No, not just actually for being here on this panel, but for the champions you are in the field to advance this agenda. And as we saw, there is still a lot of work to do to shape mindsets among educators in the classroom, to develop learning environments that are more conducive to the development of social emotional skills. I think, Ari, you made that point really well, to better integrate the world out of school and the world in school, to make learning an activity, not just a place, to build the support for teachers, to make sure that teachers have the space that they feel supported in the curriculum and the instructional policy. And I think there's that we clarify our language, our concepts, our metrics on that, and that hopefully one day it will become as normal and usual for us to do this than we do this in other fields. And if I would add, where I see the biggest challenge in this is to change mindsets, that this is not, that cognitive skills or academic skills and social emotional skills are not two opposing ends on a wide spectrum, but that they're really two sides of the same coin, that we need to develop academic outcomes through social emotional skills, not at the expense of them. And we need to develop social emotional skills as outcomes in their own right that will help people live with themselves, live with people who are different from us, and engage in a world, see the plurality as a kind of positive aspect in our society, and ultimately do better in living with the planet, making better choices between the present and the future than our generation has been able to do. So once again, thank you all. Thank you.
A cada uno de los panelistas y por supuesto a Andreas por esa excelente moderación en esa conversación. Les voy a pedir si...
Moderation, and I would like to request
Ari and Jennifer, we want to take a picture of you. And vamos a invitar a Gino también, por favor.
We are going to call Dino too for that photograph.
¿Sí? ¿Estamos? Ahí sí. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias por...
thank you for your presence and for the contribution of each one of our panel members. And we would like to call the Executive Secretary of the National Agency for Education Quality of Chile for closing remarks for this excellent day. Dino? We are coming to an end of this presentation and such an interesting conversation with different continents. And in that point of view, I would like to thank the comments and also the contributions made during this reflection, but also to call upon action for those that are watching via streaming to all educational establishments, not only to continue working on the evidence of the development of social emotional skills, but we have, as an agency, a system developed through the delivery of information as we do with SIMSE and other indicators at the level of a public policy, and also through the comprehensive analysis of social emotional skills that we have for preschool, primary and secondary education that wants to have a specific indicator for each student, each grade, and also for each school establishment that are related to the level of learning. So the Agency for Quality of Education is also worried about the promotion of learnings with a wide variety of quality, but also consider education and the quality of it from a comprehensive perspective where the skills and the teaching of social emotional skills will be important. And for that reason, we are very happy and we are very proud of being host of the presentation of the results, and we are very happy to have the contribution of all our international experts and also each one of you in attendance in the Presidential Palace. Thank you very much. Have a good day. And now, thank you once again for the Executive Secretary of the Agency for the Quality of Education. We would like to thank your participation, all of those that were here today in person and also via YouTube from the Agency of Quality of Education. And we would like to extend the invitation to review in detail the report of the CES report that are going to be in the Agency for Quality of Education. So you can click on the website and you can continue analyzing and depending on the results that we have heard today. And that we were able to continue learning thanks to our experts. If you have the simultaneous interpretation devices, please return them outside of the room because it tends to happen that you forget, but we would like to invite you to have some coffee and we can continue talking.